Hey there, this is Natalie, and I wanted to thank you for checking out To All the Men I've Tolerated Before. I am very excited because recently I celebrated the podcast's first birthday. And what better way to celebrate than to try and build up this community of tolerators and gather them all in one space? To do that, I launched our Patreon where you can make a monthly contribution to the podcast and get some amazing benefits like early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, some virtual hangout time with me and other tolerators, and other ways to really allow us to get to know one another. Any support that you can give to the podcast will be so helpful in the second year to help me elevate the content and grow our community. There is a link in the show notes that contains all the information you need to help the podcast grow. I love and appreciate every one of you. Happy birthday, Team Tolerator. Hey tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, the show where my guests and I chat about how society and our culture continuously asks us to be small for the comfort of others. Today is another special day for Team Tolerator because we will be getting to know Brianna Peters. She is the co-founder and owner of Gotham Production Studio with her husband, Matt. They live in New York City with their cats, George and Kramer. Penelope heard the word cat and now she's trying to get into my lap. She's very jealous. She is from Ohio and is going to help me process wanting to be large and dynamic and not so mid in the Midwest, especially now that she has moved to New York City and has helped many a saddie process being new in a city on the podcast Sad in the City. Brianna, I am so excited to have you here. How are you today?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be with you too. Everything's good. It's a cold day in New York City, so I'm just trying to warm up.
We had one day that was like 75 degrees in the Midwest, and then yesterday I woke up and it was snowing.
Those days. Yes.
Would you tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up in Ohio and kind of like the qualifiers you feel come with the territory of living in the Midwest?
Yeah. So I grew up in a town called Louisville, Ohio. I always gave an indicator to people. It's about an hour, 10 minutes away from Cleveland, like pretty south. Maybe like a good 40-minute drive from Akron. And then we lived the most nearest structure that meant anything to some people was the football Hall of Fame, which was in a town that was about 20 minutes, to the left of us. So there's literally nothing in Louisville, Ohio. It's just a farm town. So yeah, I had to use other cities indicators to try and like let people know where I existed, where I grew up. And then you said kind of like what qualifiers is that?
Yeah. So when you think about, I am originally from Chesterton, Indiana, which is in the northwest part of Indiana. My father used to lie and tell people that we were from Chicago. We're from the other side of the lake of Chicago in Indiana.
See, you got to use those indicators. Otherwise,
you do
get lost.
I use Valparaiso University. I'm like, have you been to Valpo?
Yeah.
Michigan City, even. Michael Jackson grew up in Gary, around those parts.
That's what I mean. We have to just keep using anything we can to us. I'm like, LeBron James is from Akron. Therefore, I'm very close to Akron. That's all you need to know.
And yes, I know LeBron James. Kind of. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
And now I'm in Dayton, which is an hour in between both Cincinnati and Columbus. Yep. And when I moved to Dayton, I thought it was like the biggest city ever.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh, we have such a big theater scene and we have music venues and we're right by Cincinnati and Columbus. I really thought that I was rocking and rolling. And now every day I wake up and it's like Dayton shrunk itself another size in the clothes dryer.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's such a great way to verbalize that, because that's how I felt about living in Ohio for as long as I did. I grew up there. I didn't know anything different. I never lived anywhere else. It was always Louisville, Ohio. And I just felt towards the end like I really was being suffocated for the lack of things that were around me, which is, two contradicting thoughts. It's like the fact that it was so wide open and there was nothing made me feel suffocated in a way.
Ah, that's a great way to put that, because it's like I could go and stand in a field right now and maybe breathe, but it's everything else that comes with it. I like to call it the politeness, the ever present need to make everyone else comfortable and to always be like, oh, I'm sorry, did I take up any space?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. That is that. And Ohio is not southern. Like we said, this is more than just like a southern charm type of thing, but anywhere essentially middle America, south, just anything that's not like some huge populated city. I do feel, one, it moves at a slower pace, and then that kind of lends itself to having that type of, oh, I'm so sorry, let me go out of my way, let me feel sorry about taking up space or being around. And yeah, it's quite sad sometimes. And uh everybody likes different things, so that's not the problem. It's not an issue if you like being in middle America. It's not an issue if you're raising children there. Like, the issue really comes when you feel like that environment is doing nothing for you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Then it really is crippling.
There it is. And I have such a hard time verbalizing it to my friends, because I almost feel like, should I verbalize this out loud? They'd be like, you don't love us anymore?
Yeah.
You told us that you would always be around. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, my mom has done a lot of that. I have a pretty emotionally unavailable mother,
Mhm.
and we don't get along that well. And she would always make these comments like, "Oh, you and your other cousin, you moved as far away from us as you could." And it's just hurt. It's hurt. It's a layer of hurt that she's not able to verbalize to me because she doesn't know how. She doesn't know how to talk about her emotions or her feelings or the way that she's feeling without adding like a layer of sarcasm to it. So she just says things like, what, you just got to get as far away from us as possible. It's so horrible in Ohio. And I'm like, you don't understand. Just because it works for you doesn't mean it has to work for me just because I'm your child. It
Yeah.
just doesn't.
When the first 2 years that I lived in Dayton, which mind you is 4 hours from where I grew up, I didn't even get very far. I can make it home for every Christmas. I can make it home for any surprise thing you want to throw at me. I get on that highway and I put on my podcast and I rock and I roll.
Right.
But for the first 2 years, every time I came home and I would talk about something cool that I did here or people I met, I would always get pushed back with, you didn't even move that far away. Dayton can't be that big because you didn't even leave the Midwest. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah, it is. It's people's own insecurities. It's taken me a long time to be able to see that. And that doesn't mean that I like when people talk to me that way. It just means that I can process what's going on
mhm.
internally for them. I used to work at a hospital in Ohio, and it was the last job I had before I moved to Rochester, New York. And I worked in an emergency room. And I was telling people, I'm like, I'm prepping to move. I'm so excited. I'm going to get out of Ohio finally. I was 21, 22 at this time. And everybody around me said some version of like, oh, you'll be back here in 6 months. Oh,
Oh,
you're not
yeah.
going to make it. You're going to hate it over there. And again, it's just when people are faced with someone being brave, they can either handle it a couple different ways. And most people are met with like insecurities about how maybe lack of brave they've been in their own life and how they've been feeling like they've been stuck, but they're afraid to take any chances. And then look at you. Why are you so brave taking a chance? And then they just get that internally. So the best way they can process that is to make you feel bad about yourself and the choices you're making.
And when I grew up, for whatever reason, we had like big city fear. We grew up right next to Chicago, literally could see it from where I stood on Lake Michigan. But whenever we would go to Chicago, it'd be like, keep your head on a swivel. You never know who you're going to run into here in the big city. It might be crowded. There might be a car. Indy is another one. We go to Indy every year for Gen Con, and it's like I got this idea in my head of what would be like doable cities for me, like cities I could handle. Indy was one of them. Dayton has become one. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. And then there are the like cities that would quote unquote eat me alive. Chicago, New York, LA, basically places where I don't make enough money to live in right now would just eat me alive and would be unsafe for me to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because safety is more than just about like your physical space. It's like protecting your mental well-being. And I wish I had thought more about that before I moved to the city, and I did not. And that again is kind of that issue that comes with that small town Midwestern thing, is that what it's done is it did not prep me in any sort of way for a life outside of that. And because I didn't want that life, I felt like I had no choice but to go do something else. And then I did it wholly unprepared. And I've made a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of things that I wish I would have not have learned the hard way. But life just didn't set me up that way. And I didn't think twice, being young and being just so singularly focused on making it to New York City, because in my head, that was going to be the place where I would be happy. Turns out, no. Turns out a place can't make you happy. It's helped, but the issues are like inside. And I didn't really realize I needed to fix those until it was already, I had been here and then racked up debt, and I have no credit. And it's just like the things kept compiling on top of myself until I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I'm 33 years old and I feel like I don't have my life together. So it's hard because you live in New York, you have a business, and so people look at you a certain type of way, but nobody really knows what you're struggling with because you just weren't prepared in life for this type of setup, you know?
I can tell, and please tell me I'm projecting and I'm wrong, but I can tell that we're the same kind of similar, where it's like, it's almost like there's like, in my head, there's the Natalie that everyone believes that she is. Mm-hmm. And it's ballsy, and it's getting her podcast done, and it's juggling a million things, and it's the life of the party. And then there's Natalie who wakes up every day being like, I haven't done anything. I haven't even made it out of the Midwest. I have not done anything.
100%. I like literally couldn't agree or feel that more deeply. And the crazy thing is I think your listeners are going to be like, I feel this too in different ways. Obviously the scale is different because I think I mentioned this on the Sound the City podcast. It's like, yeah, you know, you can do this. You have done it before. Like you have moved, you have uprooted everything that you've known and you've gone to a different place. So you can do it. You should have like this confidence in yourself that you can make it happen because you've done it before. Right. But that doesn't negate the fact that there's a lot of issues and a lot of hardships that come with that type of lifestyle. And I'm not huge on social media. And when I am, I try to be like as transparent as possible because I just feel like people sometimes have this image of me built up that things are great for me. And that's one of the reasons why I love Sound the City so much, is because when we did get to interact, I got to be able to like express myself in a way that I don't get to do in my day-to-day life and be like, I am struggling. I have a hard time mentally.
So my mom is currently in Illinois, and I just spent the last weekend with her, and I was explaining to her about all of the ways that the ways that money affected my father's mental health have transferred over to me, and how much money anxiety I have. And I ended up saying out loud, and that's why I don't own anything nice. I don't have anything that's nice. And my mom was like, I just wish that you could release yourself from all of that because you're so good with your money. And I was like, you didn't see how much money I spent on Shein, on stickers, so I could tear up paper to glue onto other paper and call that self-care.
Yeah. 100%. That's the thing with my credit. Like I didn't understand. I didn't grow up in a place where or in a family where financial security meant anything. My mom was a single mom to 4 children, and she robbed Peter to pay Paul every day of her life. So all I ever saw was the electric being turned on, but we had groceries in the fridge, or the water being turned off, but the electric was on. And it was constantly, my mom was borrowing from her family, borrowing from these people. We would get kicked out of places, our rent would be due, we'd have to be evicted again, and it was just a constant life of not treating money as anything special, or like
Yeah.
I didn't know what a credit score was.
Well, and I grew up almost believing, even though my mom ran all of our financials, and I am very transparent with the tolerators, I grew up in a very privileged way. But I was raised by people who didn't grow up in privilege. So a lot of their money stress became my money stress, even though we could have alleviated ourselves from
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But I grew up believing that that wasn't almost going to be my problem. So I grew up believing I would go to college, I'd get myself a little teaching degree, some man would fall in love with me. And then as soon as I had his baby, I would bow out of teaching like a lot of teachers did that I saw. And I'd raise that baby and maybe have 2 more. And then someone else would just go, Natalie, I paid that bill.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh. There's such a there was this moment right after high school. So I was dating my high school boyfriend. Then we graduated. Or we were about to graduate, I'm sorry. And I had this really sobering moment where I saw my future as if I stayed in Ohio, and I just married him, and he just became the police officer he said he was going to be, and he did, and just have the kids that he said he wanted, and he did. Like, he did have that Midwest Ohio life that he always talked about, and being on a farm and like all of this. And I was just, his talking about it stressed me out so much because I knew that's not what I wanted. And he's a very nice person. There was nothing inherently wrong with him. And actually, our relationship was great, but our core values were just so different. And I was only 18 at the time, and I had to end.
The only time I've come close to getting married is when I was 21 on the, or 22 on the cusp of moving here.
Yeah.
And I call it my sad Loki variant for any of the Marvel fans out there. But I can picture myself on my way to my first divorce. Like I can picture myself being married to the last guy that I was dating. Because when we were kids, we had always talked about like, well, we'll just end up married together. That'll be fun. And then we started dating and I was like, I'll just marry him because he's the one who comes to pick me up whenever I'm not having a good time. and and
Right.
now when I picture that, I just picture myself slowly drying a dish and like staring at one corner of my ceiling,
Yes.
wondering how much it's going to cost to file for the divorce and if I have the means to do it.
Right. And like picturing a life that's so different from that, and feeling unhappy. And I knew that if I stayed there, just because he was a nice person, I would
Mm-hmm.
be unhappy. And that would then in turn make him unhappy, or life would be unhappy. And I didn't want that to snowball. And it's crazy because it's also just like that's what happened to my mom. She met her first guy, her first boyfriend, and just married him and had the kids and didn't really think much beyond that. And it kept her where she was.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of consequences on her, which then had a lot of consequences on us. And all I could think of was just like, this is not the life. I can't afford to go to the place I want to be now at 18, but I know that I'm not going to get there by being in this relationship. So I just had to end it. And it hurt because I really did love him. And actually my mom like stayed close friends with him because they live down the street from each other. Of course they do. It's Louisville. But she like kept me updated. I was like, thanks. She's like, oh, he got married. Oh, he had kids. Oh, they have a farm. Oh, he's a police officer. And I was like, I get it. He got everything he wanted. And at the time I was single, didn't know anybody, just moved to Rochester, New York. And I felt like, wait, did I make the right decision?
I love to visit a farm. I love cows and I love goats. I love to squeal at animals, but I couldn't imagine waking up and knowing that that was going to be my day.
Dude, no, it's too
Because
much.
Eventually, Penelope, my cat, is no longer cute. And I'm like, we need space.
Yeah, exactly.
But, and I think what's so hard to process it, especially because I'm still living here. By the way, my mom also asks me about my last ex-boyfriend all the time. Like, how is he? Didn't you say that he was like trying to get a medical degree or something?
What's with moms and our ex-boyfriends? Do they get attached more than we do?
Well, I think my mom always secretly had the hots for my friend who was always like hanging around.
Mhm.
And then like she was so happy when we started dating. She was so happy. She's like, "Oh, that's a great choice." I go, "It's not." And it's a choice I made out of trauma.
She says yes.
Um,
Oh
but
gosh.
she was so happy that that guy was the guy. My parents eventually divorced when I was 22. And so she was so happy that that was the guy who swooped in and helped me when she left. Like, oh, thank God it was him.
Right. Jeez, my God.
But I feel like part of the hard part still living here is so many people have chosen the life that I actively do not want.
Yeah.
And you have to, I almost go into like overhype drive for them because it's like if I'm not hyping them up and all they hear is me saying that I don't want anything about the life that they've built,
Yeah.
they are going to believe eventually that I either don't care about them or I think less of them or all of it. And that's not it at all. I just don't fit into that life anymore.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I also think that that translates really well to I was just talking to someone about this today about that feeling of women being insecure with other women based off of their choosing to be a mother or not.
Mm.
Because we feel naturally, instinctually like we have to defend ourselves because we're missing out if we're one or the other. If we're choosing to have kids, you know, then we're missing out on this like free lifestyle that everybody thinks like not having kids is. And then maybe you choose not to have kids and you think about like, am I going to be like 65 and alone and I'll have nobody to love me and I'll have no family? And, you know, so you're just whatever side of it you're on, you're always concerned that everybody else is feeling judgment towards your lifestyle. So same thing for this. Like I have friends and family who love Ohio, have always been in Ohio, will stay in Ohio until the day they die. It's not that I don't respect them for that choice. I just personally can't do it for me. I can't have kids for me. Like I know that I would lose myself in them. I would give myself 100% and I would lose who I am. And I was talking to my therapist about my life and how I feel like I didn't really start allowing myself to be myself until I moved to Rochester, which was 2011. And she goes, "You're doing pretty good for being 12 years old." Like, you know, at the time, she's like, if you think about it, you're great for an 11, 12-year-old. And I was like, you're right. I'm really mature.
My therapist loves to list all of the things that I've managed to do on my own, which my great aunts and my aunts are always like, "You're so brave." And I'm like, I'm not like, it feels weird to call me brave because I'm the person who has to drive me to all of my events. And I have a great aunt who doesn't drive. So I'm sure to me, I am the bravest of them all.
100%. Everybody, I think, either they can choose to idolize and, you know, like celebrate you for the choices that you made, or they can take it as a reflection of themselves. And that's when they turn like maybe bitter or harsh or mean. And so that's just why I've always tried to be that person that's like, I don't know, celebrates them for what they're doing in their life that makes them happy. Cause that's what I want. And I'm always trying to treat people the way I want them to treat me back. Um, so yeah, hopefully moving forward, people will be a little less harsh on other women, especially about the lifestyle that they
Or
choose.
just on themselves.
Yeah.
So first I released a podcast episode about it. And then I went, oh shit, now I have to tell people that I don't want to have kids.
Yeah.
Um, and my mom was 100% on board. I think if my mom had a magic wand, I think she would have been way older when she had my sister and I, if she ever would have. And my father was so sad. That's what he tells me every time. I'm so sad. And they are so sad when they want to hook me up with a quote unquote nice boy. And then I tell them, remember, Natalie's going to do that thing where she experiments and she doesn't date straight men anymore because she's branching. We're branching. Like we've had many dinners about this. And it's one thing to have that coming from your parents or the older generation, but it is also the first thing on my friend's tongue. Like, are you sure? Are you sure you're just not like letting the ways that you've been traumatized in the past win? And I'm like, well,
I mean, to be honest though, like kind of like not win in a way, but it's like I'm learning. I'm learning from what I've been through and maybe what I don't want to go through again. And that doesn't mean it's win or lose. It's mean I'm adjusting my life and my viewpoints. And look, humans are ever changing. I try to tell this to people all the time because I'm like, what I'm so passionate about today. And I'll be like, I will never do this. 2-3 years from now, I might be completely different. I could have 4 babies on my hip and be the happiest person in the world. I don't know. All I know is what I know right now. And I feel very strongly about the fact that I have up until this point never wanted kids. And I have up until this point, I mean, honestly, before I got married and met Matt, I didn't want to get married. I did not want to get married. I did not want to have kids. I never saw a marriage that worked. I never saw a relationship that worked. Everything was always hidden with lies and deceit and dishonesty and hatred towards each other. And I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship where I hate the person I'm with. Like, I don't want that. So I just resigned myself to this idea that I would spend this life alone, but I at least be doing what I wanted in the place I wanted to do it. And then life had different plans. Obviously, I got married. But yeah, I think you just have to do what's right for you in the moment. And if it all changes down the road, it's fine.
well, and I mean, this is my new marriage advice that I dole out. And then people hate it when I say it. But I do like to remind people that forever is a long time. And I could have 7 different iterations of myself in 1 year, and I've done it.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
And then you have to rely on that other person for liking iteration number 4, even though it's completely different than iteration number 2.
Such solid advice, honestly, though, because I think about that. And I think maybe Taylor and I discussed it on the podcast once. It's that I don't understand how someone can choose like a lifestyle and like commit to something in their 20s, especially their early 20s. You're just such a different person.
I get so mad that they asked me what I wanted to do at 18. And I built an entire life around a teaching degree because I built a mental life in my head around a man that does not exist.
Yep.
And I thought that I was going to be taken care of my entire life because that's what I perceived around me. I was like, oh, you marry a man and then everything becomes easy. So just do that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And now that's not the fact that I tell people all the time, I'm like, look at my fake piece of paper, my teaching degree that I just want to do nothing with, that I understand gave me this great way to connect with people and all of it, but I resent it and it's a very expensive piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. That was another common theme on Sad in the City. It was like college or no college, because, but this is what I'm saying. My ex high school boyfriend knew exactly what he wanted his life to be at 17 years old. And he got all those things and he went down the path and for what I know seems to be very happy. So just it really depends on the person, but I will say trusting teenagers to make their whole life decisions by the time they're like 18 seems kind of crazy to me.
It is.
We don't know what we want because to be nice, we're stupid because our brains are not even fully developed.
Well, I believe it was Taylor's first Netflix special that taught me that my brain doesn't fuse together until I'm like 27.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. Our girl's out here helping change the world.
Yeah, she's doing her best and it's great. And I'm seeing her again this summer. It'll be my 3rd time this year because I'm obsessed.
I love it. She's awesome.
But then, so again, with like, I wake up and it's like Dayton is smaller and smaller every day. It's just a sweater that doesn't fit anymore. And I keep trying to make it fit, even though it's not flattering on me. It's not pulling my outfit together the way I wanted to. And I find that I fill these 2 tropes in my head. I am either the girl that whenever I say, like, I would like to take all of this content that I'm creating and build my life and my career out of it, people just tilt their head at me
Mhm.
and do the like, isn't that cute? You think that's gonna work because you're cute.
Yes, it's the, again, non-understanding.
And then there's the other trope where because people like to have me around, I become the clown in the room, and then I'm the unpaid entertainment of the evening.
Right. Yeah, it's not great. I mean, look, do you think you know where you want to like go to next? Has there been a place or
So because I have this lovely anxiety that creates rules in my head,
love that?
and because I was so afraid of places like LA and New York when I was younger, and Chicago is too close to where I grew up, they could find me and get me.
Yeah.
I I always think about it like my cousin had a great time in Seattle, and every once in a while I want to ask him, like, do you feel this way too when you came back home
Mm.
to live closer to all of us? Did you just like have this like, oh, uncomfy, it doesn't fit anymore feeling? Seattle, Boston. I'd love to live anywhere that there's a big coast of water that
Oh,
I can just stare mournfully at,
yeah,
wrapped in a cardigan,
I love that.
waiting for my fake husband to come back from sea.
Perfect. Listen to Taylor Swift in the background. You got it.
Yes.
It's great. I love that. I love that idea for you. And I mean, look, you made it happen before. You can do it absolutely again. It's hard. It like
Mm-hmm.
it's not to negate the fact that moving and uprooting your life and going to a different city and a different town, it is extremely challenging. But at the same time, it's absolutely doable.
And I think because, and thank you, you've been so complimentary and you have all this faith in me after 30 minutes, and I'm really enjoying that. I love the life that I have built here and the people that I've met. And I used to really feel like, oh my gosh, I did it. I love to check something off of a checklist. Like, look, I did it. I built the life that I will live for the rest of my life.
Right.
And then I started this podcast and I started meeting people like you and other very talented, creative people, and they know who they are. Um, and it almost became like all I say in my head is, I want to be where my people are. And they're so spread out. It'll never happen. How am
Oh,
I supposed to get all these people into one
yeah.
central location?
Oh man. Yeah, it is kind of hard. I think that's I've really have come to this resolution that there is just not enough time to do it all slash have it all. And that's a myth that's been debunked a lot through social media. Not the start of social media. Actually, the start of social media would have you think that you were not hustling enough, you were not pretty enough, you're not this enough. But in the last several years, you've really seen an upturn of a lot of people being a little bit more honest and real about their journey. And there's just not enough time, and there's going to be something that's lacking. For me, I mean, when we moved to New York, I put such a priority on loving the city, getting a job, going to school. I was doing all the things that I lacked being able to find friendships and like a core group of people. I just didn't make any, honestly. And I leaned and I relied on Matt so much to be my person, to get me through. And he became my best friend, like all this stuff, right? Um, but honestly, that wasn't very healthy and very nice to him to put all of that pressure on him for that being able to be that rock for me. Um, while I still don't feel like I have any type of like huge friendships out here, like, oh, I got my best friend, they live down the street and we do all this. I have met a lot of great people doing what I do. And I do feel like I have a little bit more of like a little bit of community of people I can tap into. So I don't have to ask Matt to watch Bridgerton with me. So I don't feel like alone. Like I can just do stuff on my own now, which is very nice. And a huge thing for me was like, I've never been alone. I grew up in a house full of people. I lived with my brother when I moved to Rochester. And for the first time I was by myself was when I was 24 and I lived on my own in a studio apartment. And I was like, this is weird. Like, I'm not used to having this like alone type of lifestyle. So it's been hard to try to understand how to do things by myself. And especially since I turned 30 and lived in New York City, my uptick of anxiety has been on another level. I get very scared to go outside. And actually, that was the impetus to make me get connected with a therapist, was because I felt myself becoming more introverted, where I wouldn't leave if Matt wasn't with me. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's not a good indicator that I can't do something without him. So yeah, I just think it comes back to, there's always something going on in somebody's life and you can't have it all. And if I have the career that I want to have, and I have the spouse that I love, I am lacking in some other way.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what it's been for me, for sure.
So when we are going on year 10 of me living on my own, completely no roommates, no nothing, the cat. Um, she's only been around for about 5 years. I'm almost convinced that I'm full feral. Like if someone would try to move in with me, like I'd hiss at them
Yeah,
for trying to tell me that the ultimatum isn't the greatest TV show that we've ever created.
of course.
It's
It,
the most true study of human nature I've ever seen. So Sigmund Freud who. And so, but when I first lived on my own, I was never in my apartment. I would avoid being alone with my own thoughts and my own head. Like I was my number one enemy. Like I was the girl I hated in high school. And I would keep this insane schedule. And then eventually, right like a year before the pandemic happened, I became a little bit more comfortable just being here by myself. And then that pandemic happened and I got to spend a lot of time with me and my head, and
yeah,
days were rough. But eventually I made this house so self-soothing that I never want to leave. I'm like, this is where all my soothing activities are.
yeah.
I can't go to your house and there be a fidget. What if I need a fidget?
Exactly. That's what I mean, is that I feel like no matter how stuck we are in our ways or anything like that, you absolutely can be a different type of person. It doesn't take a lot of time and it doesn't take much from you, right? Because I think the pandemic showed a lot of people that, especially in New York City, New York is all about not being in your apartment and being out in the world. So when you weren't allowed to do that and you had to spend time alone in a tiny apartment that you paid way too much for,
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't also then go enjoy these certain luxuries around you, you just saw people leaving in droves. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, this is not worth it. New York is only as valuable to me as much as I can get out of it on a daily basis. And so it's just, people can adapt to anything. It's just hard to allow yourself that mentality to be able to slip into it, right?
Yeah.
Because you build yourself up in your head, oh, I'm this type of person, I do this thing, there's no way I could move, there's no way I could do this. And you absolutely can. You just have to get out of your own way first. And then you're allowed to do that. So I've been through a ton of iterations in my life. I've been the person, the homebody. I've been the go out person. I've been the I'm a strong, independent woman person. I've been the I'm going to snuggle up to my man every night type of person. I've been all those different iterations. But the one thing that I've never truly felt was 100% comfortable with me.
Yeah.
And through all of those different iterations, I was either drinking too much, partying too much, having too much sex with too many people I didn't know. I was always trying to numb this part of just not knowing myself and who I am for real, because in my eyes, I've never been good enough. And so it didn't matter. It didn't matter where I moved, and it didn't matter who I slept with, and it didn't matter what I did. I never got down to the root cause of what the issues were. And I feel like that's what my 30s have been, is allowing me to like process the trauma, process the things that have happened, process that, and allowing myself not to be disassociated,
Yeah.
because that's a huge thing for me. That's how I got through my entire life, was that at a certain point, I think I was about like, I think it was the first time, I mean, honestly, that like I was very, very sad and was contemplating some serious life consequences, was when I was like 13. And from 13 to about 31, 32, I was disassociated from myself to allow myself to just walk through life as a person. Because if I had to deal with the things that had happened, I wouldn't have been a very good person.
And what disassociativeness does for me is it makes me very passive. Like, I'm like, oh, these are my friends. Oh, this is my job. Oh, this is where I live. And it's almost like I have no choice in it because the script has already been written out.
Yeah.
And I think what the pandemic did for me is it made me go, oh, we can't go back. We're not backsliding.
Right.
And I think it's hard because now I know each time that I'm disassociating, I'm like, you have to stop turning on the TV for more than 2 hours. That is a way you self numb.
Yeah.
You cannot watch all of the Ultimatum in one sitting. I did.
You're like, I can, but
And
should
I did. But my friend Annie, who's been on the podcast before, because now I'm convinced that no one likes me, and I don't know if it's like the mindset that I'm using to be like, and that's why I can leave Dayton if I want to.
Of course.
But she told me and it was a great line. She goes, listen, everyone goes through some new weird teenage phase in their 30s, and everything gets weird again.
So
I'm
true.
like, yeah. I was like, I don't want anything to get weird again. I thought that was my 20s. She's like, no.
Yes.
No.
It does. It's so strange. I pictured what 30-year-olds were when I was like a teenager. And I was always like, oh, I cannot wait to turn 30. Everyone's going to take me so seriously. And like nobody could ever be upset with me because I'll be a grown up. And I'm 33, about to be 34. Nope, that's wrong. I try to go back in time. I'm 34, about to be 35. And she still doesn't have it together. So, you know.
I turned 33 on my last birthday, but because you were 33, I'm like, I'm 32. That's so odd.
Yeah, see, now I'm just messing up birthdays for everybody else because I can't accept the fact I'm turning 35. Yeah, it's
Also, what did I ask for my 33rd birthday? A rock tumbler because rocks make me happy. I don't know. It's my new way to disassociate.
What you got to do. Yeah, the disassociation has been really hard for me. It's been a really hard it's being like disassociated from everything is comfortable for me. Trying to feel feelings and allow myself to be vulnerable, that's the hard part for me. So it's been a challenge in these last couple of years, but I've allowed myself to open up more thoroughly. I've been able to, do a lot of great forward momentum with therapy. Still not quite all the way there, obviously. But one day I will. But I just know that I'm not done evolving. I still have a lot of iterations left, clearly.
And one of the things that I think is important to notice is like you said, you can remember it starting when you were 13. I feel like when I talk about like my new antidepressant or what I'm working on in therapy or whatever, the people who have known me forever went, wow, I can't believe that just happened to you. And I'm like, no, I had disordered eating when I was 11 years old and I just called it something else because I wasn't cool enough to be anorexic or bulimic. So I just made up something else in my head.
Of course. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And I mean, over the weekend, we were looking at this big tote of pictures because I have no childhood pictures in my home because of the divorce. And I found this picture and it's me and my cousins at Christmas. And I am literally holding my breath, looking so uncomfortable so I do not cry. And I went, Mom, this was our first red flag. This was my first depressive breakdown. And she went, I think you're laughing. And I think that's the problem. I'm like, no.
No. I was there.
This little girl is in crisis.
Yes. Yeah. It is really hard, I think, for your family, especially your parents, to accept you not being okay. They want you to just be happy. And also, I say this all the time, like parents are just people. They're just people who have children, and sometimes they don't know what they're doing. Most of the time they don't know what they're doing. So it's hard. It's hard to it's hard for your family to accept the fact that you're struggling ever, but especially when you go back and try to touch back on harder times in the past. I've tried to have those talks with my mom, to be like, it really affected me the way you did this. And it's just defensive walls come up immediately. And I can't break through. I can't break through her because she has said she's not like willing to have that conversation through, well, I was a single mom and I was trying the best I could. And it just immediately becomes defensive. There's no having a conversation with that woman about the way I felt as a child. So I don't talk to my mom, like, to be honest, and I don't have a father figure. So I don't have this like strong family connection besides my brother, who I love deeply. I have three brothers, but I'm really close to one of my brothers. That's the one who has gotten married, has kids, my nieces and nephews. I love them dearly, but they live in Ohio. So I see them once, maybe twice a year. And so it really has felt kind of like I've been a loner out on my own. And then when I met Matt, I think he was my everything. He became my family. He became my best friend. I just attached to him so hard. And I think that's what the past couple years have been, is just me trying to be okay with being by myself.
Yeah. I think that also touches on why I find it so hard to communicate to the extra people in my life what I'm feeling. Because if I were to say, Dayton's growing a little stale on me, I'm worried that they'll take it personally. Because when I said, I think I have undiagnosed ADHD, my dad immediately went, I would have gotten that diagnosed for you. You don't have anything. Okay.
See, I think he took that as a reflection of his parenting versus
Mhm.
trying to take himself out of the situation and just see that maybe that was the case.
Yeah.
Maybe you still do need someone to like help diagnose this thing. It's really hard. I've noticed that like the human condition is just, it's such a, oh man, it's so hard because it doesn't make it easier the more knowledge you have. But it is great. You say a lot of the same things too, where you can just kind of understand like the human condition. And if you can understand it, you can hopefully not hold it over top of people so much when they react a certain way. Doesn't make it easy.
All right. Well, I definitely want to be respectful of your heart out. So we're going to move into the last phase of the show. We have two traditions on To All the Men I've Tolerated Before. We have to grow. So we have to talk about our biggest takeaway from either outgrowing the Midwest or, in your case, you leaving the Midwest. And then we have to walk forward in positivity and joy. And we have to manifest some good energy for anyone else who might be struggling with the things that we talked about.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I always struggled when I was growing up in Ohio, was feeling this like I was an alien. I felt so different because everybody was so happy to be where they were. And I felt like this can't be it. Like there's no diversity here. I feel smothered. I feel just weird that I don't love it. And so when I left, it opened up this whole other world for me that is like I found almost like my people. When I moved to Rochester, there's a huge like hippie community with like festivals and like these like rings that are handmade. And I was just like, I'm in my element. And it was the first time I felt okay to be different because everybody kind of up there was kind of like hippie-ish type person that was like, I'm different and weird too. And I was like, wow, this is great. So one of the things that benefited me the most leaving, and especially when I got to New York City, was being able to just have diversity around me at all times, which is something I always longed for. I didn't have it growing up. So that's just one of the things that worked best for me in my life. And I didn't want to stay there forever. And I'm very proud of myself that I didn't. Moving forward, what I want to manifest is that New York City has been so great. I love it so much. It's very hard. It is very expensive. It is very harsh in terms of the elements, even. And I get stressed out by summers now because I'm like, it's literally going to feel like 150 degrees on the asphalt and you're walking and it's horrible. And so what I'm trying to manifest in the future is like, honestly, getting out of New York and going to my next phase. I mean, I think I mentioned this on the podcast with Taylor, but I was like, I could see myself being a California babe. Like, I don't know. I just want to find that next place and I want to make that happen. So I'm very interested in California. or something along the West Coast. So I'm going to manifest that type of energy moving forward.
Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway from this current struggle and mind space that I'm in is that it's okay to not fit anymore. I think that I'm constantly like telling myself, like, you're the only person who feels this way. And it's because nothing is ever good enough for you. And what a selfish way to feel when everyone else is so happy.
Mhm.
But it's also okay to not be happy about the things that make other people happy, which you reiterated. So I will just write that down a million times today. And it's okay. And I can release myself from feeling guilty about it and also just hiding it from everyone.
Yeah.
Because I think that's why I feel so disconnected to everything now. And it's because I'm holding back so much.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, I am just going to jump on your manifestation. I would love to live by the ocean.
There you go.
So sometimes I think that it would be great to be abroad in a non-America ocean.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
But I would start with just an ocean because the lake was great. But have you seen the ocean?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I see that for you. I know it'll happen if you want
Thank
it to.
you.
You're welcome.
Please. I have had this has been so great. You don't know because I felt like I was the only person who felt this way ever.
Oh gosh, no. I do too, 100%.
So if you ever get to the point where you feel this way again and you think that you have no one to talk to, please text me because I'm probably putting paper on other paper, watching TV, being like, if only someone understood why
Yeah.
I want a junk journal instead of go to the coffee shop one more time.
Yeah, I totally get it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about this too. And I do agree with you. I think the biggest takeaway is that we're not alone in our thoughts. If you're feeling any certain type of way, I can almost guarantee you, I've gotten an email through Send the City that says exactly the same thing. There are people out there struggling right now. Just so you're not alone. Yeah.
And any of the saddies out there, I am in the Discord group and I love chatting.
That's awesome.
I am in the Discord group, so I would love to share more stories. But please let my listeners know where all of your projects are and how they can connect with you.
I appreciate that. So we're very excited. Gotham is changing its name over to Gotham Production Studios. That's always been our name, but we've always operated under Gotham Podcast Studio. So I'm very excited for that next phase. I would go to gothamproductionstudios.com if you're interested at all in podcasting or how we could help you. And I mean, I am on social media when I can be and my mental health allows me to be. It's at Brianna Peters _ on Instagram. That's it. That's all I do. Just work and take pictures of my cats. So
We love cats on this podcast. We're also big dog fans, but we do.
I love all animals, but like my babies, they're little kitties.
And then tolerators, you know the drill. Follow us on Instagram at Men I've Tolerated Pod. That'll have the link tree. The link tree has the fireside link at the very top. It's also on all of the posts now. I made that happen so that you can start joining me live and joining the conversation on Fireside. Thank you again, Brianna, for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything that you're tolerating, especially when you are trying to be your most authentic self, and that involves a new location, and people want to tell you that you're just making a big deal out of nothing. Smiles are for joy.